to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth, episode 9. Today, I have Lauryn Williams. She's a certified financial planner professional, 4-time Olympian, 3-time Olympic medalist, and the first American woman to earn a medal in both the Summer and Winter Olympic Games. While pursuing professional sports, Lauryn interacted with not one, but 2 financial advisors that didn't provide the services she needed. She asked friends what they were doing about their finances, and the answers were vague and unsettling. Constantly looking for ways to make a difference in the lives of others, she decided to put her finance degree and her MBA to use to fill the gap for young professionals. Eager to learn everything, she then pursued the Certified Financial Planning certification. Her company, Worth Winning, offers virtual services to help young professionals get the answers to the financial questions that matter the most to them. Whether that is creating a budget, figuring out a plan for paying off student loans, setting goals for savings, or understanding your 401k, Lauryn and Worth Winning are ready to help you with all things personal finance. Lauryn is also the host of her own podcast called Worth Listening, and we are very grateful to have her on the show today. Welcome, Lauryn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. I know you're super busy with your business and your own podcast. And, I'm glad that we met at the CFP Diversity Summit. And I know we didn't really get a chance to kind of hang out, but I'm glad at least we're doing this.
Yeah, it was really, really a cool event. The CFP Diversity Summit was a game changer. I really look forward to figuring out how to get more people of color into the financial industry because it's much needed.
Absolutely. When you look at the numbers, it's just unbelievable. I think Blacks and Hispanics together are like 3.7% of all CFP professionals, which is just, it's like a minority within a minority already, right?
Right.
So thank you so much for being here. We just wanted to talk about student loans today, and you're the perfect person to do that. So can you tell us a little bit about the current state of the student loan crisis in the U.S.?
The student loan crisis is very, very real. So let me just go back for a second and talk about a little bit why I got so interested in student loans. So as a financial planner, there's a lot of things that you learn, but there's some things that you're just not taught. And it's the same thing with our personal finances. You know, you learn a little bit here and there, but there's no class really that teaches us personal finance as we go through school. So there's some gaps in education, and we need to figure out how to fill those gaps. My very first client came to me and had about $350,000 of student loan debt. I was excited. I got my first client. I'm a CFP, and I'm just pumped. And then I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what to tell her to do.
Right.
And it's a thing too where income was around $130,000. So that's a great income. Six figures. You're single. You don't have any but then you have this big, basically a really nice house that you can't live in student loans.
Quite the mortgage.
It was crazy. So I was just a little bit frustrated because I was so excited to do a really good job for the first person that came to me, but I had no idea how to help them because that's not what the CFP focuses on. So it's like, where do I go and I get the information? And I started to scour the internet and look for all the different options. I met a young lady named Heather Jarvis, who is the expert on student loans. She's a lawyer. So she's not helping individuals one-on-one, but she is helping write the legislation that got the income-driven plans put into place. And she's doing big, conferences and workshops and speaking engagements to be able to share this knowledge with people. And I was like, I got to learn from her. I got to figure this out. So I went to Heather, got the information by taking one of her workshops, but I still felt like I needed more. And so I volunteered to do an internship with her. And so that's what kind of got the ball rolling for me with student loans. And I realized that there was a big gap in the industry. There's tons and tons of people that have student loans, but there is very little information about how to be most efficient. And it's become a real big barrier for people that are trying to get their finances in order and get on their way to wealth. So that's what drew me into this industry. And as I learned more and more, like you said, the state of the student loan crisis, oh my goodness, it was just really disheartening for me because I was very fortunate not to have student loans when I was in school. So it was another thing that I didn't have very much knowledge about because it didn't affect me personally. We need to make some changes to our educational system. And we need to do that. Otherwise, we're going to be in line for a financial crisis. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You don't need to be a financial guru to know that it doesn't make sense to give people, like I said, $300,000 or $400,000 of loans, and then they end up working a job that is $30,000 or $40,000. Like, it's just not realistic. We also need to do a much better job of passing financial literacy to people before they decide to take on those loans. And that starts with, the parents doing more research instead of just telling the kids, hey, yes, oh, I'm so happy you're going to college. Go ahead and take out all this debt. We've got to get the information to both the parent and the student well in advance of them deciding to make this decision. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to be able to avoid taking student loans, but you can definitely take the decision with much more awareness and much more knowledge, which is going to help you make better decisions as you continue on through the process.
Yeah, that is a great point you bring in with the parents, because it's true. Sometimes, especially I feel like in minorities, like in my case, my parents didn't even speak English, so they had no idea about student loans. I was completely on my own, and I was just borrowing whatever I got approved for. Like, I had no idea in the difference between the different types of loans and when to repay them. And it's just, I was lucky enough to just go to public school, so I didn't have to borrow much. But I see it, like, even with my wife, she has 2 degrees, and we're up there.
Right. That 6-figure debt is real.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important point to tell people that they're not alone. Because one of the things I think that's holding a lot of people back from getting help is feeling like they're the only one who did it and that they made a terrible mistake they should be ashamed of. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I have $200,000 of debt. All my friends must be doing so much better. They just got a new car. They're just doing this. And you'd be surprised the number of people that are, getting new cars and getting houses and buying things they can't afford with the $200,000 debt. So do not feel like you are the only one who got 6-figure debt. And do not feel like you cannot reach out to someone and ask for help on how to handle it, because there are best strategies and best ways to approach it. It's not about what you've done in the past. It's about what you're willing to do in the future to change your situation.
Absolutely. So where does someone start? They've graduated, and like you said, they have 6-figure debt. Where do we go from here?
I would say the first thing you need to do is take an inventory of your loans. So understand, do I have federal loans or do I have private loans? That's a really big deal and a really big difference in the way that you can approach your strategies. So with private loans, your strategy is pretty much pay them back. There's not a lot of options because you've borrowed from a private company. And that private company, you have a promissory note, they expect you to pay. They don't have to be very lenient. So you might have a really high interest rate on those private loans. What you might want to do is look at refinancing to get a lower interest rate so that it's more affordable, it saves you more money on interest over time. But then you also want to look at the loan term. So how long am I going to be paying these loans back? A lot of people like to pick the longest time possible, maybe 20 years, so that they don't have a big payment every month. Now, you do need to look at your budget and see what's affordable, but if you spread it out over 20 years and you can afford to pay $500 a month and you're only paying 100, guess what? Over 20 years, that loan is going to cost you a lot more than it would if you got really aggressive and started paying that loan back quickly. So if you've got private loans, your option, you need to pay them back. You need to get aggressive about paying them back, because the more aggressive you are, the quicker they're off your plate, the quicker you can, start moving that money towards something else, start refocusing on your retirement plan or something like that.
So what about the government loans then? What kind of different repayment plans are there in those?
Yeah, so federal loans come with a lot more options, and it's wonderful that they have all these options, but it's also a little bit overwhelming sometimes to figure out like which one of these options is appropriate for me. So one of the things that I usually advise against, there's the extended plan, there's the graduated plan, there's the 30-year standard plan, and it's for the same reason that I was just describing earlier, is those are all spread out over a really long period of time. The longer that you pay on those loans, the more expensive it is. And the thing that's a big drawback about the federal system is that it usually comes with a much higher interest rate than what you can get if you go to the private system. So you want to be careful with those first 3 plans: extended, graduated, and standard 30-year plan. Now we've got the income-driven plans next. They're super popular. The reason they're popular is that the government calculates a payment based on what your income is. So if you don't make very much money, you don't have to pay very much toward your loans. The calculation is done. They tell you maybe pay $40 or something. Even if you have 200,000 of loans, it's going to be tied to how much income you make, not to the amount of the debt that you have. So this is great because that gives you an affordable payment on a monthly basis. Make sure that you can stay on time with your payments. But if you're paying $40 on a loan that's $200,000, what's the likelihood of you being able to pay that back? It's pretty much zero.
Yeah, you probably have grandkids and still paying those student loans back.
Exactly. And that's the thing that a lot of people are not considering. They're like, oh, $40 a month. This is affordable. This is great. And they're just paying it and not thinking about the future. The thing you need to consider is that over a period of time, what happens is on the income-driven plans is what we call taxable forgiveness. So depending on what kind of loans you have, it's either 20 or 25 years that you pay on your loans. And the government says, okay, you did the best you could. You paid based on your income the way we told you to. You didn't even make a dent in paying these loans off. Wow. In fact, your $200,000 of loans are now $400,000. They grew. Ouch. Because they're still applying the interest, even though you're paying what they told you to pay. Like there's no kind of cuts or breaks there. The loan is going to keep doing what a loan does because that's how loans are made up. So there's no break in what it actually is to be a loan. But the break comes 20 or 25 years from now when they say, okay, you gave it your best shot. We're going to forgive whatever is left over. The big caveat is they forgive it, but you need to pay taxes on the amount that's forgiven. So in our example, you had a $200,000 loan. You paid on it for 25 years at a very, very low rate. You finished and you had a $400,000 loan. In the year that you are done paying and they tell you you're good to go, they're going to make it look on your taxes like you made $400,000 in that year.
Ouch. On top of whatever you made.
On top of whatever you actually did make.
So you're very likely to hit the very top tax bracket that year.
Exactly. So this is where you need a financial professional to come in and do the calculations for you, or to look somewhere on the internet and try to find a calculator if you feel financially savvy enough to understand these concepts so that you can do the calculation for yourself. Because what you need to be doing is, let's say, okay, so 400,000, what's 40%? So bad at math, help me out here. Is that 160, right?
Yeah, 160.
Yes. 160 is your tax liability. So you need to come up with $160,000, not the full 400 because they're forgiving the 400, but you need 160 to pay taxes in that year. So what would be the best thing to do is start saving money on a monthly basis, in addition to keep paying your $40 towards your student loan plan. But you save money on a monthly basis and you put that money aside so that you have $160,000 25 years from now. And maybe that amount is, $200 a month that you're saving. But that's much more affordable than, getting 25 years down the road and someone saying, hey, you need to write me a check for $160,000. So
right. That's such a good point. So basically, somebody like yourself can help somebody figure out, say, look, this is the standard repayment plan, or you can do the income-based plan. But if we save the difference, then you'll have enough to pay the tax liability when that loan is forgiven 20, 25 years from now.
Exactly.
That is so smart.
Yeah. And so this is where, like you said, a lot of strategy comes into play because it's not one size fits all with student loans. A lot of people are just like, I see these loans growing. I'm so stressed out. I'm throwing an extra $50 a month at them. So if you have a $40 payment and you're throwing an extra $50, you're not making a dent in the loan still. The interest that's probably accruing is maybe $300 or $400 a month. So you need to really be mindful of, like, maybe this strategy that Lauryn is talking about makes sense for me, where I do, my $40 to the loan company, my $200 to my, investment account somewhere for 25 years down the road. And then I keep, saving and using the rest of my money for my personal finances. So a lot of people come to me and they say, I don't feel like I'm ever going to be able to buy a house. I don't feel like I'm ever going to be able to save for retirement because these loans are weighing me down. It's all about looking at the strategy and what's the best way based on your income and your family's personal situation to attack these loans. Because for some people it is get really aggressive, pay the loans back, refinance them with a private lender. But for other people, if this income-driven plan is your best case scenario based on where you've landed and based on, what your unique circumstances are.
Gotcha. And, you mentioned refinancing. I wanted to ask you, you make a very clear distinction between private and government loans. So sometimes you see advertising, or you get a pre-approval in the mail, say, hey, one of these private lenders saying, refinance your loans. Would it be a huge error to refinance your government loans with a private lender?
It could be a huge error. So that's why it's important to talk to a professional and understand whether it's appropriate or not. If you take your federal loans to a private lender, once again, you lost all those options. So with federal, you've got tons and tons and tons of different ways to pay the loans back. With private loans, you've got one way to pay them back. Just good old fashioned pay it.
Pay it back.
Right. So you can leave the federal system and leave that really high interest rate and go get a lower interest rate, but you better be ready to pay it back. So you need to take a good look at your budget before you decide to do so. So it can be appropriate for some people. Now, on the other hand, it could be, like I said, if you're one of those people that make 40,000 and you owe 200, you don't want to take your loans private and be paying on these loans forever and not have any option. You've kind of created like bankruptcy for yourself. Your only option at this point now to get financial freedom is make more money, get 2 more jobs, because you have this house of student loans that you can't live in, that you now have only one option, and it's to pay them back. And it's really going to strap your budget over the course of the time you need to pay them back. And even if you stretch it out to make it a little bit more feasible in your budget, that's going to cost you more money, which is going to prohibit you from creating more wealth. We don't want to stretch these out longer than we absolutely have to. We want to pay them as quickly as possible. So yes, it can be good, but you definitely want to pause before you jump off that ship and go from federal to private, because once you do it, there's no going back.
Regarding private versus government student loans, what would you say is a quick way to know if you have one or the other?
So with federal loans, there is no cosigner. So that's the easiest way to tell what kind of loans you have.
Okay.
If you have a cosigner, you have private loans. Federal loans don't come with a cosigner. They give them to the person who wants to borrow, and that person only. So if you don't have a cosigner at all, it's likely that you have federal loans. If you have a cosigner, it's 100% that you have private loans.
And another key distinction that I always tell my clients about private versus government loans is that if you die with a private loan, the company's still going to come after your estate to try and collect, whereas the federal student loans, they die with you.
So this is a really good point, though, that you brought up about what happens when you pass away. This is another good benefit of the federal system. If you pass away with federal loans, those loans pass away with you. The government, makes those loans magically disappear. Your estate is not responsible. Whereas with private loans, you pass away, they are still going to try to collect that money from your estate as a debt that is owed to a debtor. So it's something to be mindful of as financial planners. This is where we start having conversations with people about getting possible, life insurance to cover the cost of that, so that, you don't diminish the amount of the estate and what you're leaving behind for a family member. If you had planned on leaving something when these student loans kick in and they take everything, and then everybody ends up with nothing. So
right. So something to keep in mind. Yes, if you have private loans and you pass away with a balance, they're going to come after your estate. So you got to do some long-term planning there. If you have a government loan, then the loan dies with you. Awesome. Yeah, good to know. Speaking of balances at the end, I wanted to go back a little there, because I know there's a public service loan forgiveness program. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how that works?
Yes. I definitely wanted to get to that. So the thing that I described earlier was what we call taxable forgiveness. And that's where, like you said, you pay over 20 or 25 years, you pay taxes on whatever's left over. But there's a really cool program that works a little bit similar, but not exactly the same. So public service loan forgiveness is available for people who work, the military, government jobs, teachers, those sorts of things, and then also nonprofit organizations. So you work in some area of public service. Then you also need to have the requirement of having direct loans. So a lot of people have bailed out on the public service plan because they've read some articles like, oh, not that many people are getting public service loan forgiveness. It's not real. The government is, sabotaging everything. That's not true at all. A lot of people just don't understand the criteria, which is, like I said, why it's important to pause, understand your finances, and then move forward, not to just kind of willy-nilly go about any strategy. So with public service, you pay on one of those income-driven plans I was talking to you about, where it's tied to your income. They tell you what your payment is, so you pick one of those payment plans, but you pay for only 10 years instead of 25 years on one of those plans. And at the end of that 10 years, the really cool thing that happens is that it's forgiven with no tax liability whatsoever. So previous example, there was 400,000 left over. We needed to pay 160,000 in taxes. In our public service example, if there's 400,000 left over, you pay $0 in taxes. You walk away. The government says, thank you for your service. Thanks for making 10 years worth of payments on time based on your income. You're awesome. Goodbye.
That's a great benefit.
Right. It is amazing. So this is another thing where, a financial planner can be a very helpful resource to, help somebody kind of find their career path. Are there jobs out there that can fall into this realm that, are in your qualified work area? So if you're passionate about teaching, it's very easy to find a teaching job that is going to qualify for public service. And even if you want to go to some sort of teaching that would not qualify, maybe it's worth it to get your experience initially, do the 10 years, get the loans forgiven so that you're in a great financial situation, have great experience, and then go off to, some sort of private company and do your teaching or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And this is where planning shares the value, right? Because if you think about it, if you are in public service or going to go into it, then you don't want to do the standard repayment or the graduated payment. You want to get into an income-based repayment plan to make sure you have basically the least amount of money now and then the loan forgiven later.
Exactly. And it's so important that you end up in the right payment plan, that you have direct loans, that you make 10 years of qualifying payments, and then that you're working at a qualified employer. So those are the 4 criteria. And like I said, sometimes people get 2 or 3 of them right, and then they get to the end of the 10 years and they haven't gotten public service, and now they're really upset, disappointed. So you want to make sure that as you're getting started, you're already meeting the criteria and that you're on track.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you share with us some resources out there? If somebody, let's say they're not working with a planner right now, they're just getting started, some websites or any resources that they should probably look into?
By far, the best resource out there that I've found is called studentloanplanner.com. This website is super cool because it offers plenty of information for a person who's looking to do it yourself, someone who's trying to educate themselves. There's tons and tons of blogs. You can type in your specific situation. So, hey, should I do married filing separately? Hey, should I do public service loan forgiveness? I'm in the military. I'm a dentist. You name it. They've pretty much written a story on pretty much everyone's specific situation. And then they also have, like I said, tons of general information for you to educate yourself. There's also a quiz that will help you understand whether you should refinance or if you should be looking at some of that taxable forgiveness strategy that I talked about. There's a calculator there that you can download. You can put your income information in, your student loan information in, and then look at the different tabs there, and they'll explain to you if you choose the repay program, if you choose the pay as you earn program, all the different options that we talked about. If you refinance, this is what it looks like. And that's where it's really important, because now you can see the numbers behind, what the decisions what the decisions you're making are doing. So, is this strategy that I'm doing right now the most cost-effective strategy over time? And often the answer is no, because we're doing what feels good to us right now, but we don't realize the impact that it's having on our financial future. So this calculator is a game changer. And then they also offer one-on-one consultations as well, if you prefer to, pay and have the expert tell you in 60 minutes instead of you doing hours and hours of research. But if you definitely are the research kind of person, there's tons of information there for you to be able to figure it out on your own.
Okay. You bring up a good point that reminded me of a client scenario that I had. And again, this is where sitting down with a financial planner makes a lot of sense for some people. One of my clients is married, and she is in public service. She works for the Veterans Administration. And in her case, filing a joint tax return is the best for her taxes, but it's not the best for her student loan situation, because if she does married filing separate, the income-based repayment plan is only based on her income and not her spouse's combined with hers. So that's another benefit of sitting down with a financial planner, because there's so many things that one hand doesn't know what the other one's doing.
I mean, that is an excellent point. And like you said, there's so many strategies, and I'm sure we're probably overwhelming the listeners with the strategies, but this is where it makes sense to get help. You are exactly right that with public service, it could be far more savings to do merit filing separately, and not be paying all that extra toward the loans than it would be to do merit filing jointly and be getting the tax benefit of doing so. Another thing that's really cool about public service is you're rewarded for putting money into your retirement. So the thing I get most common is that people are reaching out to me because they feel like these student loans are prohibiting them from saving. Nothing prohibits you from saving. You only prohibit you from saving. But in a student loan situation that is specific to public service, you are actually rewarded for saving. So put money into your pre-tax retirement account, like a 403b, 401k, and you're lowering your tax liability. So that's less money that it looks like you made on paper. But what do they calculate your student loan payment off of? Your adjusted gross income, which is also the number that was going to have that less money because you put it all in your retirement account. So let's give an example here. If you make $100,000 every year and you put the full $19,500 away, we're just going to round it to 220 to make it math simple. You now only made $80,000 that year. So you saved $20,000 of money for yourself, for your retirement, for your future. You did that on a pre-tax basis. The government is going to charge you based on you having made $80,000 this year. And the student loan company is going to calculate your payment based on you only having made $80,000 that year. So it is a triple benefit when you have public service available to you to put money into retirement. Everybody wants to save and retire. Everybody wants to pay less money to Uncle Sam. And if you're in this situation, you definitely want to pay as little as humanly possible toward your student loans.
See, that's why you make the big bucks, Lauryn.
I still aspire to make the big bucks, but I enjoy helping people while being modestly compensated for it right now.
Yeah, no, this is such valuable information. I really appreciate it. So what are some takeaways that you would want people to basically leave with after hearing this podcast?
I got one more thing I want to tell you guys about before I do a takeaway, because I feel like I skipped this and I should go back to it. Consolidating versus refinancing. So refinancing and consolidating sometimes get mixed together. People use those terms as if they're the same, but they're not. They're absolutely different when you're talking about student loans. Refinancing is taking a loan and, like you said, getting a lower interest rate with a private company. In the federal system, you can consolidate your loans. It's a federal system thing. You consolidate them. So you might have a list of loans, maybe 10 or 20 loans you're looking at from the various times you went to school, various disbursements. You take those and you squish them all down into one or two loans. That's what consolidating is. So you literally consolidated all the stuff you had into a small little package. Now that sounds similar because if you refinance, you end up with just one loan. So they are consolidated, but don't use that term when thinking about student loans. Consolidating is something that happens in the federal system, and refinancing is something that happens outside of the federal system. So when you consolidate, the thing that's important is that you've created a new loan. It's still a federal loan, but you've started kind of over again. So if you're in public service, as an example, you don't want to spend 5 years in public service and then decide I'm going to consolidate, because what you just did was start a new loan and wiped out those last 5 years of payments. And now you're starting from scratch. Now, if you're fresh out of school, you can consolidate and get them all down into one place. And that can be nice and neat and easy for you to see. And you can move forward with public service. Or if you're fresh out of school and maybe you have 20 different loans and they have 3 different loan servicers. So right now you're paying Jane on Monday, and then you're paying Great Lakes in the middle of the month. You're paying Navient later in the month. That can get a little confusing. Consolidating might be cool, so you can get them all down into one place. And then you just have to pay one loan servicer. So those are the benefits of consolidating, but it's a federal thing that happens. Refinancing is a private thing that happens. So don't let someone trick you saying like, oh, why don't you come over here and reconsolidate your loans, because they make up these terms. And then what it's actually happening is that you're refinancing and you've gotten rid of all your federal benefits.
Right. Yeah, that's such a huge, important thing to know, because then you might end up going to a private side, getting a lower interest rate, thinking you're doing the right thing, but now you lost all those federal benefits. And that'll be insane. So if somebody wants to consolidate, just go to studentloans.gov and basically just log in with the FSA ID and you'll be able to see them all there.
Yes.
And then you end up paying an average of all your student loan balances.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Yeah, that is such a key distinction. Thank you very much for bringing that up before we wrapped up. So yeah, let's talk about if somebody, because I know we gave them a lot of information.
I know, we did. We're sorry. We didn't mean to overwhelm you, but we're really passionate about getting you everything you need in as little time as possible.
Right. Yeah. We could write a book about this basically, right? So what are some takeaways that you would like some listeners to take out of just our conversation here today?
I would say the biggest takeaway is that no two student loan plans are created alike. Your situation is yours, and you need to customize your plan and your strategy based on what your goals, your aspirations are, what your income is, and what your life looks like. The worst thing you can do for yourself is to be having drinks with friends on Friday and someone tell you about this great low interest rate they got, and then you go copy off of them and do that on Saturday when that was not the appropriate thing for you. So get a customized plan for yourself would be the biggest takeaway, or create a customized plan for yourself. The other thing I would say is to, like I said, do this loan inventory. Start and understand, do I have private or do I have federal? And then do some research about what are my options for lower interest rates if I have private, and what are some options, that I can take on that are federal. Is it going to cost me more over time to stay federal? Should I be going private? Ask yourself these hard questions, and then also talk to the people in your household. So one thing that I bump into quite a bit is somebody feeling like, these are my student loans, even though I'm married, I don't want him to have to worry about it. And not taking a team approach is really also very damaging. Like we just gave an example of like married filing separately being a good option. If you guys are not in good communication about what the strategy is and taking a team approach, you're going to end up damaging, your overall long-term financial health as a team. So don't try to shoulder the burden alone.
That is such a good point. Yeah. And I've lived through that myself. It's like, oh, well, no, these are my student loans before we met, but, now we're building a life together. So it comes into play in our overall plan. So very good point. So where can we find you? Social media, websites for our listeners that might want to reach out to you?
You can find me at worth_winning on Twitter, and just at worthwinning on Instagram. My website is worth-winning.com. And I feel like, that's pretty much it. I'm Lauryn with a Y, so Lauryn Williams. If you Google me, you can also probably find all of those things. And I'm pretty easily accessible and happy to talk to you.
Awesome. Yeah. So what I'll do is for our listeners, I'll put direct links to Lauryn's social media and website and the podcast on the show notes. So just go to onmywaytowealth.com/episode 009, and you'll be able to listen to the episode as well as see the show notes and have links for all of the stuff we talked about, Lauryn's contact information, as well as student loan planner and studentloans.gov. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Lauryn, for being here. This has been such a pleasure. The wealth of information. So I love it. Thank you so much for coming out here. Just a little quick disclaimer: build a better financial future. Retirement wealth advisors and Worth Winning are not affiliated. Be sure to check with your own financial planner, tax advisor, or attorney before you make any decisions for yourself. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Send Luis an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. To read the show notes and the blog, please visit www.onmywaytowealth.com. Luis Rosa is an investment advisor representative of Retirement Wealth Advisors, Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. Build a Better Financial Future and Retirement Wealth Advisors are not affiliated. Exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial vehicle. This information should not be considered tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with the professionals specializing in the fields of tax, legal, accounting, or investments regarding the applicability of this information for their situation. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investments will fluctuate and when redeemed may be worth more or less than when originally invested.